I fell in love with an Iranian girl in college, and sh we finally started to date. It took months for her to notice who I was. We start to date, and I quickly learned you can't date a Shiite Muslim girl from the upper classes of Iran the way I used to date, which is, hey baby, I stole a six pack. I want to go drink it in the parking lot. I mean, so I had to date her whole family, and so the only time I could see her socially or privately was to go to the apartment near campus where her mother lived, where she lived, and the little brother, little sister, and the mother. And I just fell in love with her family. I fell in love with the culture. They're all speaking Persian. I'm learning baby talk Farsi, and then her father, who hadn't moved to the States yet, he was still in Iran, in Europe. Her father was a colonel in the Shah's Air Force, and he bought F-16s. The way my character ends up doing, he was really high up in the echelon of power in the Shah's structure, and so he comes, and I'm terrified to meet him because he's the military colonel Shah guy, father of my girlfriend, and I loved him too. I quickly discovered he was, so I grew up in blue collar neighborhoods where power was physical strength until I met real power. This guy may have weighed 145 pounds, 5'7", but he carried himself with such bearing and such poise, and he spoke slowly and real power. But I watched this man, and they're trying to hold on to whatever money they brought from Iran and start a new life. I watched him work an 8-hour shift at the shoe factory on the river in the mill town where I grew up in the day, and then he'd work at a gas station convenience store at night, 16 hours a day, trying to keep their money. And he would sometimes grocery shop in between shifts because his wife spoke no English and was very depressed. And so one night I'm at the apartment helping the younger sister type of paper, and my girlfriend asked me to help her father with the groceries in the elevator. So it's just me and this man, and he looks at me. He's probably, you know, God, 10 years younger than I am now. He might be in his 50s, but he says in his very thick accent, he says, I used to work with kings and queens and presidents and vice presidents and prime ministers in my office by myself. Now I serve candy and cigarettes to kids who don't even know who I am. And he shook his head and said, I never thought this would happen to me. And I never forgot it. I just never forgot that. Years later, I read a newspaper article about a woman who's gets tax bills from the county. She says she didn't know. She doesn't pay them. They evict her, repossess the house, auction it off, discover wrong woman, wrong house, bureaucratic error. It's happened more times than you would imagine. But the man who bought it in legal, fair, and square auction was under no legal pressure to sell it back, and he wasn't sure he wanted to because he's going to make a real killing on the resale. So I cut that little article out because I thought, well, this is a fascinating, ethics dilemma. And I finished another book, and then I picked it up 3 years later, and then I saw the man who's who bought that house in the auction had a Middle Eastern name, and I immediately saw that the colonel of my ex-girlfriend in that elevator, and that's what started the whole book. The question was, what it would be like if this Iranian colonel was the one who bought that house. Now it's not him, I imagined someone else, but he was the seed for that character. And but to answer your question, I began with him because his story was the one I was most interested in before I met Kathy, the woman who loses her house, and then I got interested in her equally for different reasons. The most helpful fuel for me as a writer is, and I've talked about this ad nauseum in writing classes, but Faulkner was asked late in his life, what's the main thing a writer needs to do what you've done? He said, well, it's not talent, it's curiosity. And so I find that when I'm writing with real authentic curiosity about a situation and a person in it, things will happen I didn't see coming. So I did enough research to know who would actually evict Kathy, and it'd be a deputy from the county sheriff's department. But in the writing, it became clear that the deputy who's evicting her is drawn to her. And that surprised me. And then I know that she's attractive, or at least she's attractive to him. And when he shows up in the storage locker to check on her, I'm going, what are you doing in my novel? Get out of here. I got two other people in this novel. So he surprised me, And then but thank God he came in because I learned so much more about her. You know, she's a recovering alcoholic drug addict. I actually thought that she was right when she says she's just a recovering drug addict and she can drink without a problem. And then I quickly discovered writing scenes that, well, she can't drink either without having it be too much. So yeah, and it was weird, man, as you know. So the novel begins in the first person present with the Colonel, and then Kathy's voice is first person past, and then they're fully what maybe half the novel before Lester gets his point of view, and I I tried the first person because they're in the first, and it just sounded false. So he finally came in the third person subjective, and yeah, he's an important part of the story, but absolutely did not see him coming at all. About plotting, I don't ever plot out a novel. I really write it one page at a time, one sentence at a time, one word at a time. I'll shape it after I found the beginning, middle, and end. But no, my God, when the boy gets imperiled, without spoiling it for anyone who hasn't read it yet or seen the movie, but when the boy gets involved, when I started writing this novel, Jake, we just had our first child. We have three kids. They're all grown now, and I think we're having our um, and my wife is pregnant with our second child, and I could not bear, as a father of babies, I could not bear to write about a child imperiled. I don't know. I had to build a titanium firewall around my soul to go into that part of the story. But I didn't know what was going to happen to the boy. But afterwards, I mean, for me, and I'm not saying I pull this off, but my hope is always that the characters ring true in everything they do, everything they say, everything they think. I work really hard on character truth. I'm not saying I always pull it off, but that's to me always the task. And so even if which means often you'll write a story that goes in a direction that you as a human being hate. I hate the ending of that novel. I detest it. I detest it. And every time someone tells me they just read it, I want to give them a hug and chocolate and aromatherapy. But I stand by it because I think the combination of those three human beings was sort of the elements of a perfect storm. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question. I know that when we find out what happens with the boy, I was devastated as a human being, but as the writer, I felt it was the only thing that could have happened. I've had option after option for things, and in my heart never it just never increases. That's nice. I don't believe it. But with House of Sand and Fog, it all came together so fast. I was amazed at how quickly it came together because I've had projects in the works for years. And we're 2 days from principal photography beginning, and then the lead actor or director bows out or financing falls through. And that's so common. With House of Sand and Fog, it was like 14 months from its publication to movie day. So no, it was wonderful. I have to tell you, I'm not a movie lover. I mean, there's some movies, of course, that have changed my life, and I admire all filmmakers and respect them. But I'm a book lover, man. I mean, for me, the penultimate experience is the book. So when a movie gets made from the book, that's a good problem to have. It's a beautiful thing. It will help get the book into other hands usually, and that's all good. But to watch the movie, and I like the movie a lot. I think Vadim Perlman did a lovely job, but so both my sons were baseball players and football players, two things I didn't play when I was a kid. And my oldest son, Austin, was, he just like closed the game as a closer pitcher and, won the game. And some dad pats me on the shoulder, said, chip off the old block, huh? I said, no, I don't even know how to play baseball. That's all him. But that's how I felt watching the movie. Said, I mean, back to my son, I can take credit for having, making love with his mother and, bringing him into the world. I can take credit for buying him a glove and driving him to practice. But man, this is him up there. And that's how I felt watching the film adaptation of House and Fog. I can take credit for the characters and the story, but this is a whole nother thing that's got nothing to do with me. And it's kind of a beautiful secondary pleasure, really.